Welcome to the Better Never Ends podcast. We've made it our mission to share with you the expertise and wisdom of role models and leading experts in their field, teaching us about how we can be better, telling stories about their journey to better, inspiring you to discover yours. I've got some quotes.
Okay,
I took them off your website.
Yeah, mental fitness. What is that?
Yeah, well, start racking up the mental miles and reps, right? That is the quote.
Love it.
That's the thing that grabbed my attention to you in the first place, right? So, or at least that mental fitness concept was the thing. So maybe we go in there.
Let's do it.
So what do we mean then by racking up the reps, hitting the sets and reps? What do we mean by mental fitness? Robin Hughes, here you are in the episode. Ex-patient of mine, now podcast guest. Tell me more about that concept of mental fitness.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? I see it on a bit of a spectrum. You've got mental health at one end, and let's say, just for the sake of argument, you've got mental performance at the other. Mental fitness, I think, tends to operate, in my opinion, in the middle ground. Mental health is incredibly important, but it does have a stigma around it in terms of, one, people don't necessarily want to be labelled and diagnosed with a clinical disorder. Completely appreciate that. Two, people just want to talk about it because it's cool. Whereas mental performance, maybe not necessarily a great understanding around that, and it's more reserved for the elitist. It's like performance is elitist language, right?
Yeah.
Whereas mental fitness, we can all relate to fitness, right? We know what fitness is. We know we should do it, and we try to do it physically, but you don't see many people doing it mentally. And I think that's where that grey area, that's where mental fitness occurs. Like, the reason for the language is deliberate. It's to make it relatable for people and make it approachable. But the way in which it works is it's not clinical. We're not diagnosing you with a condition. But we are looking at the holistic individual. We are looking holistically at what can be impacting you, whether that is a couch to 5K, getting to the gym for the first time, or if you are just someone who wants to improve their mindset, increase their awareness, and wants to compete in a park run, a high rocks, a half marathon, a marathon, an ultra. It all gets bigger, doesn't it? Mental fitness has it. Just scales up, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Mental fitness has its place.
Yeah. And I think really why this is appealing to me and why it grabbed my attention is because we don't necessarily think of ourselves as we have lack of muscle strengthitis, or lack of fitnessopathy. We don't label it that way, but we all intrinsically know that improving our strength, improving our fitness is a good thing. And we get that. I mean, most of our listeners are, health obsessed or physios or someone in that profession, and they get that, they understand that. But we don't always think of it on the mental side of it. We do, as you were describing, we label it on the disorder end, and we appreciate it on the elite end, but we forget about that middle ground, which is why I really like the term, because it suddenly becomes accessible to everyone, that it's this thing you can train, getting the reps in. I think that's why I like it. It's like we all appreciate as well that if you want to run a marathon, you've got to train for it. You've got to get the reps in. You've got to get your runs in. If you want to lift a heavy weight, you've got to get the reps in. You've got to keep going. You wouldn't expect to get in the gym and lift a 100-kilo deadlift if you've never lifted before. You wouldn't expect to run a marathon if you've never run a 5K before. So you've got to keep working at it. And sometimes I've had this in my sessions. I've recommended they look into some mindfulness or some kind of mindset work, and they come back the next week, it hasn't really worked. It's like, what do you mean it hasn't worked? And perhaps because I haven't got the confidence or the conviction to see it through, because I haven't got the understanding, I've not followed through with it, even though in the back of my mind I thought, you've not really given it a good enough go. I've not quite had the language and the confidence to push it through. So that's where this conversation started, wasn't it? That I was really intrigued by that idea, and I thought we need to have that conversation now as two healthcare providers, two health conscious people who care about it, and let's see if we can build this trend, right? Because you are founder of Getahead, which is a mental fitness app. So tell us a bit more about that and about your journey into that from yourself.
Yeah, so it was founded by Chris McAdam and Adam Doherty, and I came on a couple of years ago. So I'm a co-owner, a head of mental fitness. That is my role. What we're trying to do at Getahead is make the abstract tangible by making a training ground for your mindset. So what we were saying about the mental reps, actually giving you a platform to be able to do that, as opposed to just talking to someone. Talking is great, and everyone's doing it, which is brilliant, and the trend should be going that way. But at some point, we need to stop talking and start doing, and actually have a way to be able to do that, a tool to help with that. Now, when you're talking about changing your body and potentially improving your health by going to the gym, you talk about it for a while, and then you actually go to the gym and got a place to go do that and conduct that. When it comes to the mental side, what do? You talk to a friend. That's great, really good. But what happens in that moment is, the reason why it's so great is because it starts to make those abstract thoughts a little bit more tangible. We know when we write things down, it becomes clearer. That's what happens in those conversations. You're starting to articulate what's going on in the craziness in this brain. That's why we enjoy talking. Great. But can we take it a step further and actually act on those things rather than just bring them into consciousness every now and then? Because that's just paying lip surface to what we really can do. We're just scratching the surface. We're signing up to a gym membership or reading through our workout plan once and actually taking no action on it. You need to go in and do the reps to get the results. So at Getahead, that's what we're doing. We're an on-demand sports psychology app, partnered with Birmingham University as our research partner. We're an official mentor training partner of Hyrox and UltraX. So the two verticals that we sort of exist in right now are functional fitness and running. And we're bringing to the space mental fitness training for everyone, basically, whether you're a beginner or a seasoned vet that highly identifies as an athlete, but works a 9 to 5. You're not a professional athlete, but doesn't mean you should value it any less. And you spend copious amounts of money on triathlon bikes, potentially, on supplements per year, on your coach, on your physios, on your nutritionists. But when you claim that mindset is the biggest thing, which most athletes do, they will say it's 80% of sport. You don't do anything to it. You don't devote any time to doing it, to working on it. And that's what we're trying to change. Make it easy for you to do.
So what do you find inside the gym that's the gym membership for your mind?
Can you reframe that? Is that okay?
So once you're on the app, what do you find in the gym?
Perfect. Okay, so we're working on a few new features now. So it's obviously for me to be able to talk on what's existing right now. I'm always a few steps ahead.
Yeah.
But it's a series of different workouts, basically, is the way to put it. We're trying to use that language to make it more accessible. Those workouts can be cognitive behavioral therapy, acceptance commitment therapy, compassion focused therapy, worksheets that have been changed into a more, engaging way to do via the app, where that's filling out certain responses. You're prompted by questions and you have to fill out those things, log data that's going to help improve your mindset over time. It can be guided imageries, guided mindfulnesses, where it's sitting there and listening and creating that picture in your mind. Or it can be breathworks, for example. And then the step above that, is the psychoeducations. So that's sitting down and listening to 3 to 5 minute psychoeducations where we unpack a certain potential theory, but we don't get bogged down in the jargon. It's more about telling it actively through stories, analogies, and making that abstract part of your brain a lot more tangible, and combining the world of research with the world of application, which we understand when it's talking about this is where this theory actually looks like in your sport. This is what elite athletes have done, and this is how you can start to see it and start to use it in your sport. And here's the workouts as a result of that psychoeducation that you need to do to work on that.
Can you give me an example of one of those things?
Yeah, of course. So let's go for one of the ones I always go to as a go-to, because it's easiest one to reference, and we'll probably reference the person that inspired it as well, which is the cookie jar, which I know you've read David Goggins' book, is inspired by him. Now, unbeknownst to himself, he was maybe scratching on the surface of some psychological theory when he started talking about the cookie jar, which, for those that don't know, is logging all of his previous achievements and accomplishments, so that when he was faced with his next challenge, he'd dip his hand in the cookie jar, pull it out, and go, well, I did this, so what's in front of me is nothing. I can achieve this. Incredibly simple concept, but the cookie jar as a tool. So we've got psychoeducation on it to understand that, but the name of the session is, I think it's Types and Sources of Confidence, where we talk about confidence itself as an equation that we can solve, as opposed to it being a phenomenon that we just leave up to chance and leave up to luck. It's something that we can actually force.
You're shortcutting it. Yeah, I like it because it's something that you can build through previous success.
Yeah.
But actually, what if you're newer to it, or you haven't had the success that you're looking to achieve? Then what's the strategy?
Yeah, you got a confidence gap, right? That is a very known thing. There is a space where you need to take that leap, and sometimes, like we're saying there with the cookie jar, David Goggins is talking about previous achievements. Great, that's a really good source of confidence. It's probably the best source of confidence. If I know I've done this before, then I can do it again. Great, because we know we can do it, right? The newer that evidence is, the more obviously powerful it will be. If it's old evidence, you've got reasons to doubt it. But there's other sources too. So we can look at one called verbal persuasion. So verbal persuasion is literally just words that people have said to you before, like comments people have had about you. And the way that I'd sort of relate that to is, say, for example, you've had a coach growing up that made a comment on your form. Say we're doing, I was a swimmer growing up, so I'll talk in the world of swimming. I was complimented on my breaststroke as a stroke. I was very good at it, but I was new to swimming, so I could have been good at any stroke. It just happened to be that was the one I picked up, and I got a lot of reinforcement from my coach and also from my peers. So that was the thing I stuck to. I felt very confident in that environment doing breaststroke, and it became my number one stroke and the stroke I was best at, right? But that stemmed from initially people giving me a lot of positive reinforcement about it. I was building my breaststroke cookie jar, gigantic. My butterfly cookie jar, I don't even think I popped the lid on that one. So I hated that. I wasn't very good at it at all. When it comes to verbal persuasion, there's different ways in which the information has power, and it depends on the individual. So if it's someone who's close to you and you really respect their opinion, that's going to be a really powerful cookie, right? But if that is from someone that you don't know, a complete random stranger, you can go one or two ways. It can either mean nothing, or alternatively, I'll talk in a scenario. You're in the gym, working out, and all of a sudden someone comes up to you, never met them before, never seen them in the gym before, and they, hopefully not creepily, give you a comment, say, I just want to say, honestly, like your form is insane. Like, you look crazy. I wish to look like that one day when I'm older, for example. I know that I would go back to the weights, probably lift up a stronger dumbbell, because I'd feel so energized by that.
Yeah.
And it's something I would love, because someone who took time out of their day, didn't need to say anything, didn't know me from Adam, came over and said to me. That's a really powerful thing, but from someone that is no one, I don't know who they are, right? That's one source. Probably I'm going on a bit of a tangent.
No, it's
good. So that's adding a bit more complexity to the cookie jar. That's not just a previous achievement. That's something that someone said. You've then got vicarious experience, and that's basically just seeing others do something that you believe yourself to be able to do too. So if I see someone that I think is not too dissimilar from myself running a 4-minute mile, then I'm going to have confidence in the fact that, you know what, if they can do it, then why the hell can't I?
Well, it's a bit like the Roger Bannister thing. No one had ever done it before. So
Exactly.
It was a huge, massive thing. And now, most elite men, well, all elite men can do it, right? Anyone who's trained a reasonable amount of time will be able to do a sub 4-minute mile.
And that is one of the stories we use in psychoeducation when we're explaining vicarious experience. That's a perfect example. I appreciate you taking the words out of my mouth there. That's perfect. But that is exactly what it is. So being able to see other people achieve something, that gives us confidence that we can do it. If we don't relate to that person, then maybe it won't be so confidence filling. And then the final one, which comes into a few different things, it's from Bandura's self-efficacy theory, but I guess that's very academic. We're talking in the world of application here. So this one maybe struggles to always get applied when I've worked with clients before. It's the hardest one. But it's physical and emotional states. And the way in which that's interpreted is that we have confidence in the physical or the emotional cocktail that we're experiencing. So that when we're in a scenario and we feel that same physical or emotional cocktail, and we know we performed well in the past, then we're going to perceive that as something that is a determinant of a good performance. So if we appraise nerves as good, and we've had experience in the past as that worked well, then that's going to be something that we feel confident when we're experiencing that.
Or the opposite.
Exactly. So it works both ways.
Yeah.
But then that all gets into a little bit of cognitive reappraisal, which I'm sure we'll probably come on to later when we're talking about like injury and somatic experiences of flare-ups of like a symptom that you had in the past and reappraising that.
Yeah, I've never enjoyed public speaking, which might sound weird as a podcast host.
You're brilliant.
But I cognitively reappraise the situation, and I'm just talking to you in front of me, and the microphone. It's only now that I'm suddenly aware that, because I've raised it, right, that other people are listening, and to some degree I just feel like I'm talking to you. But if you put me on stage, I will still get that autonomic response. My heart rate will build, my hands will get all sweaty, and my brain gets all foggy, and I struggle to really focus, and it takes me 2 or 3 minutes to get into it. And even then I know I'm not at my best throughout the whole thing, because it's very stimulating for me. I find it really, really difficult to be at my best in those moments. But I'm a lot better than I used to be. I used to be, even when I was at school, I was terrible. But it's taken me a long time to develop that skill, and I would imagine I could fast track that a little more with something like, with some more education and support and some tools like this. But yeah, I would have always perceived and attributed that situation with negative. And as a result, it reinforced, because it was always the same thing. And it's only in my adult life, and as I've started to understand the mind a little more, that I've learned that I can flip it and change it, and that I know that these things are natural, and the nerves are there. To some degree, the adrenaline is there to support my performance, and I can recalibrate. Put me in a sporting environment, those same hormones are doing the same sort of thing, and I'm buzzing, ready to go. And I'm feeling absolutely ready to perform at my best. And it's, I've performed highly in finals, stuff like that, where I've got that evidence of things have worked out for me in sports, but not standing up on stage.
I love that. I was going to go into cognitive reappraisal, but I don't think I need to now. You literally just said it how it is. But that's exactly it. So you've got 2 ways to look at reappraising a situation. You have to reappraise it through facts. So in terms of, when I say facts, I mean, I know that, like, from a health point of view, that this tingling in my hands is just blood circulating. I know that this shortness of breath is just my heart beating a little bit faster potentially, and I know that's what I need to gear myself up to perform. That makes sense. As a youngster who's experienced that for the first time in an environment they've never been in before, of course alarm bells are going to go. Like, why would they not? Like, as soon as I get a little bit of pain in my chest, I'm like, oh, I might be having a heart attack. Like, because, like, I just know that that's a weird feeling. I shouldn't have that. It doesn't matter if I'm sitting at home, I'm lying down on the sofa, I've just maybe finished a big meal. It's like, oh no, it's about to happen. I knew it was going to happen at some point.
Yeah.
But the other one that comes into mind there is the evidence-based approach, which is you don't have at the start. So you have to start off where you just said there with the fact-finding mission. Then the next thing is that curating evidence and being able to apply that. So, I felt this symptom before. I know that it was fine, so it will be okay. Now that's but you got to have that conversation with yourself. It is very challenging, especially when that version of you, we can get into that in a little bit later, but that version of you is incredibly powerful in that moment and wants to drag you away from a very freshening environment. So it's going to be sounding the alarm. It's going to be hard to argue with in a performance environment when nerves are high. So this is where the mental training comes in, because how on earth can you expect to be able to navigate that relationship with the voice that you only have a conversation with in those environments, and you never have a conversation with it outside? How can you expect to navigate that? Because you never trained it. You've never actually had that time to sit down and, before an event, reappraise those emotions. Be like, okay, I know this is going to happen because of this. I know this voice is going to pipe up, and I know how to actually navigate it because I've had exposure to talking to it.
Well, even in my example, I played sport all of my life. I've definitely not, because I love it. I really love the experience of it. I don't love speaking on stage. I don't love speaking in public. So I've erred on the side of avoiding it, and have not had the same volume of that to get the evidence that actually it could go well, So I guess that's part of it too, is that my mass exposure of sport throughout childhood and adulthood has led to me being more skilled for it, and my lack of exposure to the opposite has made it harder, and now I'm learning later. I guess the other thing that's bringing me this is reminding me of is the 2 relatively common things. Is that a lot of what I do in physio is trying to encourage people to exercise more and perhaps go to a gym. People have often negative connotations attached to the gym, and that might be the same thing that we're talking about here, is that you're having to facilitate that process of trying to get someone to go into a gym or to do an exercise that they don't want to do, or to do something that they're not comfortable with, they haven't got the confidence to do it. Or even something like, I had an injury doing this, let's say lifting. I had an injury lifting, so I don't want to lift again.
Yeah.
So their evidence is that lifting is bad.
Yeah.
And you're trying to rationalize with them, saying, yeah, but what you're going to do, not lift all your life? And in their mind, maybe. So you're having to try and change that. So have you got any kind of extra details you could add to some of those very common injury-related conversations we'd have?
Yeah, there's a few things to follow there. So please do stop me anytime to try and realign me. In that environment, what we find ourselves doing, I guess, our brain is quite intuitive. It learns things quite quickly. And when a negative experience occurs, we'll say negative now, but I don't really like the label of negative and positive. We will label that. We've worked out that doing this then will result in X. So if I do X, it will result in Y, let's say. So maybe I injured myself loading up doing squats for the first time. Well, that's the evidence I've got. That's the evidence. That's the hill that I'm going to die on. Well, when it comes to like in this environment, we've got to think about what our brain looks like. So every day we're taking in information, and we're all taking the same information that's out there, and it means, I guess, nothing at that point. Then it goes through, I guess, our processing system, and I want to imagine that processing system, if you will, is a bit of like a car, right? Going through like the catalytic converter. So when it goes through it, we know it then spits out, it distorts it, changes to in obviously catalytic converter, adds oxygen, so it's CO2 rather than carbon monoxide. In this case, it spits out like how we actually perceive that environment. So our perceptions, our thoughts that occur are all filtered through first, but that filter is built by the kaleidoscope in which we've built fragments of what we've learned through life. So, for example, if we've had a bad experience in the gym, that's one fragment. Okay, had a bad experience squatting, that's another fragment. I've had experience growing up that people told me that you shouldn't lift weights too young, like weights would stunt your growth, or that you're going to get injured if you lift too heavy, another fragment. All these things we build up through life, through learned behavior, and it forms your filter, your catalytic converter in this case. Now, the thing is, with a car, you MOT it every year, and you make sure that the catalytic converter and everything inside the car is running smoothly, and we're spitting out the right things. With your brain, when was the last time you actually sat down and addressed the way in which you perceive the life around you?
Yeah, less often.
It's not that often that people will do that. So when we're talking about in an injury point of view, like from someone having an injury, the way in which they're perceiving their injury and their recovery is going to be heavily distorted by those fragments in which they're built and those core beliefs that they have. And that's where we need to get to understand. If we can understand the way in which someone's distorting their reality, then we can start to challenge the distortion itself, as opposed to be like, well, no, you just need to think like this, because they don't see life the same way you do.
Yeah, you can't just tell someone. You have to help them see it and understand it and believe it for themselves first. You experience it. Like you can't just say, no, it is safe to lift. It doesn't work that way. You have to get them to see it in their own lens. Yeah.
And then build evidence. And that's the only way that you can really actually manage this, is if we've built up this distortion of catastrophizing every single time I feel like, say I've had a hamstring injury, and I catastrophize every single time that I feel a bit of tightness in my hamstring. Now that's a somatic experience of like tightness in your hamstring. I get that all the time because I sit down and work all day. So I feel that every single time I get up. I've never had a hamstring injury though, so I never really tune into it that much, not at all. However, recently I had a little bit of an injury with my foot that was a result of like a tight calf. So now when my calves are tight, I'm hyper tuned into that. Like I know, I can feel that. So I've got that distortion of catastrophizing any calf tightness as like, oh crap, like I've got this pain occurring. Now, the first step in anything is having that awareness that I'm first of all distorting. I am actively trying to do that in that scenario. My brain again is trying to protect me because it's learned that feeling leads to this problem. And you got to think about, if that problem was something that was really, really difficult and challenging for that person, in terms of like maybe they stop them being able to compete for a while and they're an athlete that thrives in competition and going to the gym, then they're going to avoid that at all costs, regardless of if it's just a normal somatic experience. So for them, it's trying to normalize those feelings and sitting down with them and understanding, well, how should the human body operate anyway? So we should start to feel these things. Can we put it on like an intensity scale of what is a comfortable level and what is the right level? When does it get to a point where it's actually, no, that is probably that could be a cause for concern. We need to almost rewire that response and challenge the catastrophizing and allow them to decatastrophize it.
And this is where I would then use my assessment to help them understand it. Firstly, to alleviate my worries of whether it is a genuine problem that needs to be protected from, or whether actually it is more of a catastrophization in these situations where, hey, I've just measured your strength. Your strength seems fine. I've just measured your ability to hop. I can see the range of movement's normal here. There isn't any evidence of any structural pathology. So could we potentially then start to see it through a different lens and change the angle that we're looking at it? So I deal with these kind of cases a lot, so I'm comfortable using some of that language. But it's interesting here you talk about it and just slightly different. I like that kaleidoscope idea. Like the kaleidoscope of your experiences. I think that's a really lovely way of helping people see into their own kaleidoscope, actually.
Make the abstract tangible. That's what my job is. Like, it honestly is. Speaking in riddles and analogies is the way in which people can then actually contextualize what they're experiencing. In that case, it's, well, what is your kaleidoscope? What is this injury actually, what fragments has it added to the kaleidoscope that's actually causing you to interpret the pain as something like this? So I think and I think to your point there, you're saying about doing the testing and then proving it via like quantitative metrics. I spoke to an athlete that she missed out on the marathon a year ago or so because of injury, and it was obviously training for a marathon is incredibly difficult. So it was in like the last couple of weeks she had to stop, and she ran the marathon again this year. So great, she had a success story of coming back. But for her, when I was analysing how her injury rehab went, she really struggled with I guess having that sort of, she needed those facts, that truth, she needed that evidence. And it was that her physio was almost like the coach for her. And having someone that they respected their opinion and respected that, okay, they know far more than I, was a really good grounder for her for when she did start to decatastrophize, to the point where she would be messaging them and she would have that contact with them, like, I'm starting to feel this. And then they would be able to like put it back into a the normal realms of like acceptance of like, this isn't just it's okay, this is you should experience that isn't tied to the injury, because that's initially where their brain will go. And I think what's really important to do, taking that a step further, if we look at analyzing self-talk, you can't be in your athlete's brain constantly. You can't. You've got the time in which you sit down and talk to them. However, what we can do is they can carry forward that voice. I've had athletes, and it's probably one of the best experiences when they say this. They say when they're in like struggling in a race at some point, they hear my voice. And now I've never said those things to them that sometimes they say, but just the fact that they have that cue of being able to switch from their self-talk that's dragging them down, catastrophizing in this environment, and they switch to like, what would Robin say? Or what would Robin say to me right now? Is incredibly, they create this narrative in their mind of this, say for example, their physio and that self-talk, and they can feel the same impact of that advice even when they haven't said those words.
Yeah, I think that's that rings true to me. I often will spend time with my clients, encouraging them to really understand the things that I'm doing and why I'm doing them. So, because I will say to them, I want you to be thinking like a physio. I want you to be making these decisions in between sessions so that we don't waste time, we don't miss the opportunity. If there is a flare up, you know what to do because we've gone through it. Here's the things. And I also know that when you're in the moment and you're feeling the feelings, the emotions, the pains, the tightnesses, whatever it is, like as a physio myself, I'm still going to catastrophize. If I'm feeling it, I'm like, bloody hell, is that my ankle that's not quite right? Whereas then if I can then separate, so what would my physio think in this situation? What would she say to me? Then it takes away from the emotion. And that's what I do for people is I say to them, like, if I was in your situation, I'd be worrying too. But I'm not. I can be removed. I can think more logically, more rationally about this situation here, and I can join the dots without emotion.
Yeah.
And that's what I can do for you by helping you join those dots without emotion.
So let's unpack that a little bit, because I think that's great that you're doing that. But let's actually show how they can do it, because I'm all about action and rather than just like talking about what the theory of it. So in that scenario, what we're doing is we're actually contextualizing the self-talk. And to do this, I want to like, I guess, bring up probably the most popular analogy in psychology ever, which I'm sure a load of people will know, even if they're not remotely interested in psychology, which is the chimp paradox. right? It's Professor Stephen Peters, Chimp versus the Human. I'm not going to go into the complexities of what the book says because there's no need, but the chimp is part of our brain, the human is the other. We can talk about the computer, but let's just leave that and part that for the moment. We don't want to complicate things. Human is sort of that function, executive function, making sure that we're logically processing things. The chimp is more the emotional, irrational response. However, we need to live with both. Both have their benefits. They're there for a reason, that we evolved as humans and got to where we are today because of both. And they still operate day to day and manage a relationship together. Now, when we catastrophize, chimp brain switches on. Decatastrophizing is when the human brain will step in with the logic. So what we can do to take it a step further and rather than maybe just saying human and chimp is actually then giving context to those voices. So what I'll do with a lot of athletes is let's name that chimp if you want, or let's name that inner critic the drama queen, because I think that's the one that we've got there. The drama. What is their name? Let's try and build. Is it from a character that you watch, maybe a cartoon or in a TV program? Is it potentially someone that you know in your life that is just always moaning and much, like so annoying, right?
Mood Hoover.
Yeah, I don't know that reference.
We referenced it on a previous podcast. I mean, one of our previous guests, Simon Cabot, who's he said there'll be people in your life who just suck the life out of everything. They're mood hoovers.
Perfect. I love that. Let me use that moving forward. The moaning myrtle, I guess, is from Harry Potter, right? Yeah. So we can build the context of this voice, and the moment that we give it like that persona, it all of a sudden becomes a little bit more manageable because it becomes tangible rather than abstract at that point. But then what we need to understand is we are not that voice. That is a mere fragment of the voices that go in our head. Not to say that we're all sort of got a bipolar and we're schizophrenic or whatnot. We hear voices. We do have voices in our head, and they take different forms at different points. Of course, naturally, you've got the cheerleader, you've got the coach, the tactician, you've got the supportive carer, you've got the critic, you've got the moaner, the complainer. We've got all these different personas of self-talk. Yet we just say self-talk and brandish it as one thing, which severely limits what it is. So what we need to do in this environment is we're starting to distance ourselves, because if we can remove ourselves, and this is I guess from a bit of an acceptance and commitment therapy, which is we're diffusing the thoughts that are coming up, the ones that we're catastrophizing, because we're separating ourselves from them. First of all, we're making awareness. I'm noticing that right now I'm catastrophizing. Struggle with that one. Catastrophizing, and this is the thought that I'm having. Then have acceptance for the fact it's there. I can't do anything about it. I can try and push it down, but I use the analogy all the time. It's a bit like a beach ball, pushing it under the water. Well, as soon as you let go, it's going to fly out from the surface and potentially hit you in the face. That's what happens to me on holiday all the time. Yeah. That means the thoughts are going to be harder to deal with when they come back, right? And more powerful because of that. So we know that the thoughts are there. We've got to accept that. Giving it a name means that we can detach from it, because we are not that. That isn't our entirety. Like, you're Charlie, but you're not always Charlie, the moaner and the complainer, right? But there might be a little part of you that has that as well in that scenario. So that's a way we can distance. A really good one as well to help distance and provide that, like you say, that perspective, is to be able to it's like naming yourself. So calling yourself out before each sentence. So like, Robin, attending to yourself. No, if someone says your name, you look up, you pay attention. Calling yourself by your name draws attention to it. It means that we can pull ourselves out a little bit. We can also distance ourselves from the thought, rather than, for example, I'm thinking I'm not good enough. I'm gonna, or this pain right now is gonna pull me out. I'm gonna pull my hamstring, and I'm gonna end up back at square one. Instead, the reframe is I'm having the thought that my hamstring is going to blow up right now, and I'm going to end up back at square one. That's just a bit of distance. So I'm having the thought that. Next step, potentially, if you've got the time to do it, is I'm noticing that I'm having the thought that my hamstring's hurting, and that I'm going to potentially end up at square one. If we just create distance for it, we give ourselves time to be able to actually see it for what it is, which is a thought, which isn't you. It's been distorted by our fragments, by our kaleidoscope, and it's something that we actually have a choice whether we attend to it and what value we place on it. That makes sense.
I want to take that beach ball analogy a little further as well, because it makes sense to me here. I really like that that instant imagery of what happens when you try and push it down. It pops back up in your face. paying too much attention to the beach ball when everyone knows there's a whole swimming pool out there that you can explore that doesn't have a beach ball in your way.
Love that.
Right? And you could just keep flying. You could just keep going to other parts of that swimming pool. So then that, and I, by the way, I use that. I've read that book and I like it. I think it's got some real, or at least the early part of it, I thought loads of stuff here, and then probably the end part's dragged on.
Completely agree. I stopped reading halfway through.
Yeah, but the first bit I use it all the time because I help people to actually think of their pain as their chimp. So when I was reading, I was like, God, this is really interesting. This is a bit like how chronic pain works. And so I then help people see that their pain is different, they're separate to them, and can they close their door on their pain? Can you close the door on that chimp that's inside of you? And I encourage them to name it as well.
Yeah,
you're not going to silence it, because you can still hear it banging on the door. You can still hear it, and with your beach ball, like you know, you could look behind you and still see it. It's still going to be in the swimming pool.
Yeah.
But if you spend too much time trying to push it underneath the surface or like interacting with it, trying to get it to shut up, it's not going to work. You're essentially feeding it. You're feeding the chimp. So close the door on it. You know it's there in the background. Focus on all the other amazing things that's going on in your life and in that room and in that swimming pool. So I do like the analogy. I think it works really, really well, and it's really powerful for people to understand that their pain is separate to them. It is just part of that protective, automatic response, that chimp just trying to worry, just essentially grabbing your attention. And most of the time, pain is important. It actually is there to change behavior in a helpful, positive way. But every now and again, it's started to miscalculate the stuff. It's starting to, just overreact and overprotect, and it's become dysfunctional.
Exactly. And I say another really good analogy, which is taken from ACT again, which is the passengers on the bus. I don't know if you've heard that.
Don't know.
So passengers on the bus is really good exercise. But it's basically training you to understand that you are the bus driver. You're on this bus, navigating the roads of life, trying to get to your destination, wherever that may be. And as you go along the journey, you stop at different bus stops because that's your job. You have to pick up people at the bus stops. And passengers get on each time, and some leave. The passengers that come on the bus, you don't have a choice over who's on the bus. It could be anyone. But the people that get on the bus vary greatly. You get some that are the backseat drivers trying to tell you where to go and trying to say, well, no, you're going the wrong way, go this way. You've got the ones that are complaining, say, if you check the petrol tank, like, I think it might break down soon. So you may want to go fill up for petrol. You've got the ones being like, there's a bump back here. This doesn't feel quite right. It's suspension jacked. And you've got the ones that are quite going about their day, quite joyful, talking to you, have a nice exchange, getting ready for their summer holidays, enjoying their time. All these different thoughts are on the same bus, and you have no choice about who gets on the bus. But the choice you do have is which ones you decide to listen to and give power to. And now, in that, acceptance is an interesting thing, because a lot of people struggle with, well, if I'm just accepting it there, then surely what's the point? That's fluffy, that's nothing. In my mind, and this is maybe a little unpopular for some people, acceptance gives you control. By virtue of being able to accept something, you take the control away from the thing that's demanding the control. So there, if that thought is trying to overpower you and is on your bus and is complaining and shouting at you, if you're trying to complain and argue with it, you're giving it what it wants. Almost like a kid that's shouting and hollering and complaining. Or say, do you remember the phrase when you were younger? I don't know if it would happen to yourself, but I'm sure people better listen to it. It's like your mum says, don't laugh at them. You're only gonna encourage them.
Yeah.
Giving them attention is going to encourage them to do more. And now I'm not saying you have to ignore completely, but if we can just accept that they are there, they're just going about their life and doing what they're doing, which is a evolutionary response. What they're doing is not unfounded. They shouldn't not be doing it. But we have a choice of which ones we actually tune into and the ones we listen to. So imagine on this bus, where are we going to place them? What seats can they sit in? We can yell at them and scream for them to get off, but at that point, we've stopped the bus. We're not moving anymore. We're not going anywhere, which you can't do in life. Can't do during a performance in that environment. You need to be able to keep going. If you turn around to talk to them, you don't know where you're going. You're going to crash, right?
Yeah, but this is essentially what happens, right? People shut their life down to give too much attention to their pain, to their problems. and they forget that actually life is going on around them, and they're missing all the opportunity that comes with staying on the bus and moving forwards.
And I love that sort of that comparison there, because what you get a lot of people doing is tuning into those thoughts so much, and that becomes their existence. It becomes their identity almost in that scenario where I am that thought. You're not. There's plenty more thoughts there, and look, we know we've got a negativity bias. We know that without a shadow of a doubt. Then why don't we try to level the playing field? And I'm not saying that we need to just be constantly positive, because toxic positivity is without a doubt a thing. But I don't think leveling the playing field is a bad thing either. And in positive psychology, they have the build and broad theory. So it's literally broaden and build. It's like broadening what information we take in so that we can build up, in this case, our positivity, our positive outlook. So rather than just honing in on that thought, let's just broaden the thoughts that are on the bus. Let's just look up and see what other thoughts are there, rather than giving all our attention to that one, because I'm sure you might find something that's a little bit more positive.
Yeah, by the time people come to me, certainly I'm thinking of the chronic pain patients here, because I think it's the one that's most relevant to this. Because let's also just rewind a little. If someone has an ankle sprain, it's really valuable for them to put all their attention into improving their ankle for a finite period of time. Let's say the tire on the bus is punctured.
Yeah.
It's really important that we get off the bus and the tire is repaired. You know, we spend that time to do it, but we're not going to spend too long. Let's say it's a job that, let's say we fix it, but the tire's not quite right. We're not going to just keep looking at it, keep staring at it. What's going on here? We're scratching our head. Can't figure it out. We're going to change our approach, maybe take it to the garage, get someone else to look at it, and maybe just move on and accept that it's not quite right, but we can still move forwards. But that's what happens with chronic pain. People get obsessed with the problem and why is it still there, and they hyperfixate on it. They keep looking for someone to fix it rather than broadening their problem, broadening their horizon, and thinking, actually, I could just progress elsewhere. I could just focus elsewhere, because it's hard, because it takes so much of your attention. Pain really does grab attention. And from experience, starving that attention is one of the most effective strategies for being able to manage, or hopefully for most people, completely alleviate those symptoms. So this analogy, it works, doesn't it? It's got legs.
And I'd like to sort of explore there, take a time now, because you're bringing up like chronic pain. So someone I had a conversation with recently and done some work with, Emily Dowling. She's doing her PhD at King's College London, and part of her work is within Embody, so it's exploring mindsets and body in the body. I'm hoping I'm not butchering this, by the way. I'm going to try my best to try and do her research justice and what they're doing over there. And they've done a lot of research into cancer survivor patients, I think 19 to 25, so quite young, and exploring how they then deal with pain after that. Because for a period of time, pain is all they knew, and pain was their life, right? That's what they tied to. And they're doing some really good research where they've got this 7-part video series of basically using storytelling and empowering vicarious experience. A bit of a callback to what we were saying about the cookie jar there, about what can give you confidence, of stories of people overcoming and seeing a real positive impact on these young people's lives and the way that they interpret the pain that they're feeling. And I know we're talking about cancer survivors here, but there are definitely correlations between that and people that experience chronic pain in terms of an injury, let's say, for example, that's causing them a lot of issue. Because in your world, it's all relative, right? Like, and for them, what they've found that's been really beneficial, again, I'll try not to butcher it too much because this isn't my research, it's picking up on someone else's here, is that vicarious experience has been really impactful. So having those conversations, listening to people that have got successful stories has been really, really helpful. But beyond that, what was also been really good has been that these people struggle with preparing for the inevitable eventualities of experiencing that discomfort, those somatic experiences again. And it sort of goes like fail to prepare to fail, right? When it comes to like our experiences in our body, Like if we know that they're going to occur when, for example, say we're taking back to the injury here, we've recovered from the injury, but we're not back to running at the same full force. So we know when we go out for our first run, there's going to be some niggles that are going to come up that could take us all the way back to the start of like, in terms of our mindset of like, this is where it started before, we're going to end up causing a problem, it's going to get worse, I'm going to backtrack. But what we can do is we can prepare for that moment when we go out for that first run or walk or whatever it is, to be able to have a positive mental reaction, emotional reaction, and thoughts that occur by a process we call it's implementation intentions or if-then plans. Really, really simple is what it says on the tin. It can be used in different contexts. For like, I think there's been a lot of research with people like getting into the gym. If-then plans are really good, or trying to habit formation. If-then plans are great because if this occurs, then I will do this. That's as simple as it is, and that can either be a behavior. So if I come back from work at 5 p.m. And there's no food in the fridge, then I will go and cut up some veg. Like that's a simple thing that I can do that's going to put me on a pathway to, if there's no food ready, then I'll go cut up some veg, because it's like the simple way to be able to get me making the food, and a healthy choice, healthy food choice. In this case, it can be if, for example, I feel that pain in my leg, then I will do X. So it's either dial back into a different movement, or it could be a positive chain of thought. It could be something that we've, like I said earlier, trained in a cognitive reappraisal. So like we know that our statement there to tell ourselves that we've got the self-talk from our physio is this. If this occurs, this is what I say to myself.
Yeah, I think that is something we do a lot actually as physios, is we are if-theners.
Yeah.
we help people to have backup plans, flare-up plans, and regression plans, progression plans. I think we're pretty good at that in general, and perhaps it's even just adding that language to it and being really specific and saying, if this happens, then we do this, right? And it just something, and I've definitely done that in the past, but I think it perhaps is something we could do even more overtly to be more effective at it.
Write it down.
Yeah.
Have it down in front of you, and brainstorm the different scenarios. So this is where the Stoic principle of inversion comes into play. So just basically imagining something going wrong, and then imagining yourself actually being able to overcome and perform well in that scenario. So purely and simply, imagery is incredibly powerful, especially for people that recovering from an injury. So my partner's she's had a really bad knee for years and years and years, and recently underwent quite a serious surgery on it. And now she's never ran before, like maybe ran here and there in PE or not, excuse me, but she hasn't ran properly. So we went out for her first run ever the other day. And you could see her limping, but her knee is obviously getting better, but it's obviously weak at the moment. But the problem that was there, that should be fixed now. But she's been limping for so long that's what she sees. That's how she moves. That's how her body feels.
That's how she identifies.
Exactly. I don't have confidence in that. I don't move that way, right? Imagery is really powerful in environments like this, and we can take it from like elite sport. So there's been studies which I can't directly quote, so I'll try my best, but it was done in golf basically, and it was people had golf lessons and other people just had an imagery plan of like imagining themselves with the swing, a very strict plan. I won't go to the complete intervention because I can't remember it all, to be fair. They showed that there wasn't actually really a significant difference in improvement versus the people that hadn't practiced to the people that had like just the people who had practiced and people who had done the imagined practice. So we know that building images in our head is really powerful, and we struggle to distinguish from the real and imagined experience. This is something that will be really powerful for athletes and recovering from injuries, because we can do two things. We're going to do the inversion imagery, where we're starting to imagine things going wrong. We're putting ourselves in the emotional and somatic cocktail of experience that could occur when something went wrong, and then see ourselves overcoming it. So we almost train the brain, the neural pathways, to be like, this is what you need to do in this environment. You've been here before. So when we were saying earlier about David Goggins and not actually having the evidence because you haven't actually done it before, this is a way to actually build that evidence through an imagined experience. It's like, if this occurred, then I would do this. Like, maybe a bit of a trivial example, but I quite like public speaking. I would say I'm quite dynamic.
Yeah.
When I was younger, and I don't think there was anything that really pushed me to be able to be good at that, apart from when I was younger. I used to always imagine myself talking on stage. That was something that I would dream of, like being a performer. I loved the idea of that, but I never performed. I never did that at all. Never physically done it. I just always imagined it. Then, when I got older, I listened to a lot of motivational speakers. I would watch the videos of Les Brown, Inky Johnson, Eric Thomas, Tony Robbins. He doesn't like to be called motivational speaker, but talking on stage. So I surround myself with that information. So subtle flex, when I came head boy and I did my first speech to 350 potential students, parents of students, I did okay. I wasn't too bad. I felt like I'd been in that environment before, you know?
And that's when, if we draw back to me explaining sport versus public speaking for me, I would imagine myself as a sportsman when I was younger. I would imagine performing, playing and doing the things that I would see on the TV. I would do that a lot. I would never have imagined myself on stage. It just wasn't part of my interest and my desires. It just wasn't there. So yeah, I guess that rings true.
And then I think there's the different versions of imagery there. So it's like you either imagine play by play. So that's very sort of like surface level imagery of like game plan imagery. So I want you to imagine yourself going for a run. We're going to take you through like getting your socks on, getting your shoes on, lacing them up and getting ready to run and taking your first steps, climbing that hill at that mile 5 and so on and so forth. We can do that as like a game plan. We're going to pick up the pace at this point. Alternatively, we can throw in some inversion, which is, all right, this problem occurs. How do we react? What occurs there? So in the context of an injury, is you start to have a flare-up. How do we react? What happens in that scenario? But beyond that, going back to my partner, apologies, I meander all over the place, with her knee, what I've got her to start doing is starting to imagine and start to, first of all, consume content of people running. She's never really been into that stuff, but start watching people run. I'm not talking about elite runners. You don't have to watch the marathon runners that are just running crazy times. Watch a real person run. Just watch them run. See how they actually move. Then start imagining that experience. Start actually building it into some visualization. And it doesn't have to be too structured. It can be a mere daydream whilst you're making your porridge or your cornflakes in the morning, right? That visualization doesn't have to be, if it works for you, great. But if it doesn't, you can just be something that you're doing as you go through your meaningless daily tasks. Start visualizing yourself doing that movement. Start feeling that working, because then that builds into when I go for that run. Okay, I understand the way that moves. And we like to, when we learn a movement when we're younger, we break down all the little bits of the movement and we say, there you go, crack on. We don't do that. We don't get kids to do that. We break down small little snippets. We say, do this, do this, do this. I want you to imagine, so I remember learning breaststroke. It was scooping the ice cream and then reading the book. And that's a real easy image to build into my head. And now I know how the movement works. You can do the same thing with people that are trying to, like, if they're limping or stuff like that. What is the movement? What creative imagery can we have of how you should be rolling that movement, how it should be smoothly going through? Like, that way, it becomes not a detailed deconstruction of the actual movement, which is incredibly complicated. They say if you ever want to mess with someone's head on a tee box and about to take a golf swing, ask them to break it down and tell you how they do it. Because as soon as they go to swing, they'll be thinking of all those different things. And we know that as humans, our cognitive capacity is 7 plus or minus 2 chunks. So if we're trying to recall all that information, your brain's going to start buffering, and next thing you know, computer says no, and you've got paralysis by analysis, which we see in many sports, especially boxing. You see athletes that are good, the judge is like, why are they not throwing a jab? Why are they not throwing a jab? They're trying to analyze everything and try and figure out when they need to go, what they need to do, what shot they need to take next. They're not even jabbing. They're not even doing the movement. They're paralyzed by analysis.
Yeah.
So in that, if we know that to be the case, we want to break down the movement into either really simple cues. So for her, with my partner, when she went for a run, I was like, just imagine when you're running. Like, I'm a decent runner, but I don't by any means know all the movement. Just going onto your big toe. Just feel your big toe. Weight going onto your big toe and pushing off as you go through. For her, that really noticeably made a difference to her stride, and she actually meant that she wasn't even thinking about her knee. So it was a bit of a distraction, which is really healthy too. Without, again, I've gone on a tangent. Distractions and how that can work in rehab is interesting.
Yeah, I use it all the time. I mean, I had a client today actually who 2 years post ankle sprain is still feeling ligament-like symptoms, which wouldn't make sense because 2 years down the line the structure has healed as much as it's going to heal by this point. But he still feels like he can't cycle, which would be unusual because cycling is a very low load exercise and it doesn't seem typical of a ligament. So we were exploring it. He says, yeah, when I play tennis, I'm absolutely fine. I can run around and tennis is great. And I had to ask him, well, that's interesting, isn't it? When you cycle, when you don't have a distraction, you really feel it. But when you're playing tennis and you do have a distraction, the sport, you don't feel it. It doesn't make sense that way round for a biological structure, because the loads in tennis are much more strenuous and high on the ligament and the ankle itself versus cycling. It doesn't fit. But it does make sense if we consider this as a pain malfunction, as a chronic pain situation. And we then started to reframe and discuss and the assessment revealed just that, really. Actually, there was very little structural abnormalities there, but there was a lot of protective responses that were still built in. There was tightnesses, there was he was completely stable ligamentously, but he was very hesitant, very wary of stretching and going up on his toes. So yeah, distraction is a really powerful tool that I use either for rehab or for just helping someone see, actually that doesn't quite fit, does it?
Well, that brings on to like a really important skill that I think all physios should be trying to use with their clients, which is cue words. Cue words are really, really simple. It's literally just a word that cues a behavior. It can cue a behavior, it can cue a movement, whatever it might be. And going into that imagery, I was talking about that creatively building that, we can break down a movement into just a descriptive cue. So, for example, it might be, I don't know, it can, first of all, cue word can either be a short phrase, a word, or an acronym, something that they can, when they read it, it then informs them what they need to be doing, their focus point of what they need to focus on. So we could cue a movement by saying long stride, for example. All right, I'm just going to focus on my long stride right now. That's what I'm going to focus on. Or it could be a really, I don't know, technical part, which I'm not going to go into because I'm not the best place to make.
I'll give you a corkscrew. So corkscrewing through the foot, through the knee, through the hip to help someone address the knee dropping in, the foot dropping in, and it just sometimes it is really a nice way of them feeling this corkscrew effect through the floor. So they rotate all the way through the leg. And that doesn't work for every person. Sometimes, what do you mean by corkscrew? But some yeah, I get that. And they'll corkscrew through the floor and immediately it kind of solves the ankle, the knee, the foot, the ankle, the knee and the hip. You know, it changes everything. And then the spine, the pelvis doesn't wobble around either. So one word often changes the way someone moves in an instant.
And this I love language, because language is so subjective. Like, we attach meaning to words, and all of us have a little bit of a different interpretation of that meaning as well. Yes, there's the Oxford Dictionary definition, but we do have a little bit of a different interpretation of how hard a word hits, for example. If we know that to be the case, that means we can reprogram what a word means to us personally. So, and if someone came in and they saw for example, going back to boxers, but they have like mantras for their fight camps, that doesn't mean anything to me. But to that boxer, it means something so powerful, because they've attached maybe one word or a handful of words. 1,000 words have meaning for it, right? And in that case, you just described and broke down what the corkscrew means, but it's literally just corkscrew. That's the word, right? So I think that's what I would say for physios. Help them create keywords that help them visualize what the movement looks like, or distract them in a way. And I want to just briefly touch on distraction, because distraction as a word, talking about the subjectivity of words and how words have connotations, like therapy, for example, has negative connotations attached to it. I don't know why. Like, I don't know why it should, but I know why it has. When we were younger, we're constantly, oh, Charlie, focus up, don't get distracted in class, constantly. Your parents, focus up, stop getting distracted. Like, all the time, being distracted was a bad thing. Why was it? Like, because you weren't focusing on what they wanted you to focus on. Fair enough. In the context of running with an injury for the first time, I know I keep saying running, but it could be any sport here, distractions can be really healthy. And when it comes to thoughts, we can distract ourselves from the thoughts, which that can be helpful in the moment, but we do need to deal with them later. That's going to come back up. But in this environment, if it's allowing you to potentially get through the workout and not focus on the thoughts that are starting to worry about, like the little niggle that you're having, then surely that's adaptive. That's going to help you in the long term, as long as you then go back through after and you decatastrophize the fault. Healthy distractions are a way in which we can, in the short term, bypass that sort of thing. So what is a way that we can distract ourselves? Some people say, I like humming a song. I count back from 100. Things of that nature. Or I start, if you're, for example, out running, I start running on a track. So I look at people's like different colors of people's sweatbands and I start grouping them and stuff like that. Like there's ways to distract yourself in that scenario that can be adaptive. So I'd rather think of like negative and positive, more so adaptive and like unadaptive in that environment, or productive or not productive. That's the way I like to say it.
We've spoken a lot about the chronic injuries here, and something I get a lot is people who are stuck with this identity of their pain being them. I'm, for example, like my ankle injury. It's like me saying, yeah, I'm Charlie. I had ankle surgery. I've got this ankle problem for the last 20 years, and that's just who I am. Sorry, I can't do that because, and I just like gesture to my ankle, it's me. I've got this ankle thing. I'm wise enough around the physio side of things to know that that's unhealthy for me, to distance myself from that defining me and who I am. But a lot of people really struggle with that. They struggle that they've had this problem for however many years. They've had this thing that does dictate and fixate them, and they put all their attention on it. So inevitably they can start to label themselves as such, and they can identify as Charlie with ankle pain, or Robin with back pain, whatever it might be. So it's a really interesting thing, and it's something that those around you can then start to identify. Like people still now, oh, Charlie, how's your ankle coming along? And I can quickly say, yeah, it's doing great. I'm fine. I'm doing well. And I'll move on to another subject. But that's quite healthy for me. I'm not struggling with that. But some people, that can then really remind them in a bad way that they've got this thing they're trying to recover from. They've got this issue that they're working with. And everyone starts to think of them as this person who has back problems, and they can't ever find a way out of it. They can't distract healthily. So I will often tell them, you might have to say to this person, please, can you just not ask me actually about that? Like, if there's a positive update on it, I'll let you know. But for now, it's going to be quite helpful if you don't ask me about my ankle, about my back. Are there any other strategies that you've got around identity, or any other ideas you've got around identity that could be helpful for the situation?
The identity stuff I absolutely love, because it's the single most powerful intrinsic motivator. The words in which we describe ourselves, the adjectives to our identity, are the things that we're going to attach to ourselves to and live by, right? And there's a sort of psychological concept called cognitive dissonance. Purely and simply, it's, do my actions align with who I believe myself to be? We've got dissonance if those don't align. Now, the moment that you start to build an identity around something such as that means that all those behaviors, maybe potentially of like rehab, we start to potentially self-handicap, because we fully identify as someone with this injury. And I mean, for better or for worse, depends on the individual, because it is so context dependent. Say it's an individual that doesn't really get much attention from a loved one, didn't really get much validation, but as soon as they got injured, they got a load of support, a load of help from that caregiver. That's going to be something that they want to receive. So they learn that, okay, the injury is actually something that's helping me get that support and be acknowledged. That's a very, very specific scenario. But now when that person comes to you and isn't doing the training plan and is constantly down in the dumps, being that moaning Myrtle, that negative Nancy, we have a bit more understanding of why they're doing that. It's because in this scenario, like, the injuries actually provided them something that they didn't have beforehand. In relation to their identity, is if they build an identity around it, the mere act of trying to recover from it or sort it out will actually put them in a state of cognitive dissonance. They're starting to, cognitive dissonance in of itself makes you anxious. It will make us like, there's a disparity between who I am and who I say I'm going to, what I do and who I say I'm going to be. So when it comes to identity, it's incredibly important, as much as it is so deeply ingrained, is to make sure that every client has a healthy balance of identity, because you can go the other way. And this is the thing that I see most commonly. It's interesting you say that, because I've seen it the other way a lot with athletes, where they end up coming to getting injured and they come to a physio for support. But during that period of time when they're recovering, they struggle so much more than just physically. They struggle mentally because their identity has been, like, I guess, compromised, because what they did every day to validate identity was to run 5K every day, for example. This is just random, example. If they can't do that, then they're not validating it. So what we need to figure out for an athlete is, how do we build a diverse identity, first of all? Identity around your injury. Is this you? Is this completely who you are? If it's not, then who are you? Like, let's try and build something away from that. So I am Robin, Robin the son, I'm Robin the friend, I'm Robin the employee, I'm Robin the psychologist, I'm Robin the athlete. I've got so many different facets of my identity, and each of them I have to feed. If I don't feed them, then I have an imbalance. And if we have an imbalance, that means we have a dependency. And if we have a dependency, as soon as that thing is compromised, that's when you're going to get struggles. So if we have a heavy athlete identity, before I go any further, that's on the surface level. There's more to that. Because if the athlete identity is fully tied around performance, I am a runner because I run a sub 3 hour marathon. Okay, when you get injured and you can't do that anymore, or on the return from injury, you're struggling to get back to that pace, you're going to continue to have that issue because you're not being able to validate your identity as an athlete, because then there's a cognitive dissonance. Instead, how can we define you as an athlete in this rehab phase that is more constructive than just tied to like a performance outcome? Can we build your athlete identity around taking care of your body, making sure that we're on top of the rehab, make sure that we're functionally fit, making sure that maybe part of your athlete identity is the social side and we're validating that. Part of your athlete identity is learning, and there is a part that's performing, without a doubt. But when I spoke to a few athletes that were recovering from an injury, and both of them raised it, which was interesting, and I've seen it countless times, is people struggle with not the comparison to others, but the comparison to a former self, pre-injury Robin, for example.
I can completely believe that, because with the ankle surgery happening in November, it would come off the back of me PBing at 4 events last year. Right, really good year, the fittest I've ever been for running. And it's been tough to get back into the rhythm again, because I know that I'm not going to be in that shape now, having 6 months off running. I have got back running. Ankle feels great, like feels really good. It's no longer the limiting factor, it's now fitness. But I'm struggling with the motivation of booking in events or doing anything that's around performance, because I'm not going to be at that level. And I've managed to, I'm going hiking in a couple of weeks, I've managed to attach it to that. I want to feel good when I'm out hiking, so I need to run in order to build my fitness for that, so I can take it away from the performance comparison to my former self. But it was tough, actually. It took a little while for me to want to get out and do that.
And I think I appreciate you sharing that, because I think every athlete struggles with that, but they struggle to articulate it, because as soon as someone says to them, "Oh no, you did well," it's like, yeah, but I didn't, because I didn't do as well as, that's not like the best I've been. Like, I could do better. And especially as you get older as well, and naturally things get more challenging, and you're not PBing in terms of all-time PBs, you're getting slower, which is naturally going to occur. But the problem is that your identity as the athlete, I guess making sure we're always tying this back to the injury and where this comes in the physio world, is that they need to build a new identity that they can validate whilst injured. And this is where, again, going back to language, and I think this thing's all ties together, is the word excuse has a really bad connotation, yet again. Don't make excuses. You shouldn't make excuses. He's just making excuses. Why? What's wrong with excuses? Who said excuses were bad? Excuses are context. Context is important. Without context, you can't actually accurately define and interpret a success. You need context.
So we talk a lot about language here, right?
Yeah.
I just say, it's not an excuse, it's a reason.
I love that. Brilliant. What a good reframe, right? Like, why can't we use that word? Like, okay, if you're whinging and moaning about things, I understand that's where maybe you've got the negative connotation. But if you say, I ran this high rocks, my PB is, let's for sake of ease and numbers, is 60 minutes. I ran it in an hour of 10. On the surface of that, in the high rocks world and social media, and 60 minutes isn't even that good really nowadays, but an hour and 10 is like, well, they've done worse, surely. But if we add in the context of, I'm 3 months post-surgery, for example, or some people are like, oh, that makes sense. But if we say, oh, I'm feeling a little bit down, or like I'm just coming to the end of my recovery, or something along those lines where I don't quite feel to my 100%, people no longer validate it. It's like, well, why does that? That's just an excuse. But it's context, and the reason why I say it and bring it back to the recovery is that when you're in your injury state, when you're rehabbing, like in that period, where that is an excuse, that's a reason. Right? That is the context. We need contextual consideration when we judge our performance. I use this with my athletes all the time, especially the ones with perfectionist tendencies. I'm prone to it myself. This is where I built most of this stuff, like from my personal experience as an athlete, right? I had a diagnosed with OCD, incredible perfectionist tendencies, high-performing athlete. I was national swimmer. At 13, I was the fastest UK 50-meter breaststroker in the country. And then I proceeded to be diagnosed with invisible disability, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, type 3 hypermobility, and POTS, postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome.
And we had a podcast on this very subject last week, released just very recently. So anyone who really is interested in that, including yourself, you should check it out because it's really, really good. Yeah, Alex was absolutely brilliant. So I had to add that in because I can't believe the fact that we're literally recording this the week after. But yeah, sorry.
I wish I was in that room. That would have been great to watch.
Yeah.
But for me, having that condition, all of a sudden it was like, well, that's an excuse. But then my brain was, well, in that moment, I'm not going to let something that's lived in the shadows of my accomplishments overshadow my dreams. That was my phrase. That's how I lived. I was like, this isn't going to overshadow who I'm going to be. But because of that grind mentality, listening to people like David Goggins and whatnot, I pushed my body to a point and expected myself to perform to a standard that my body just didn't have the capacity to perform. End up incredibly injured, dropped out of my sport, couldn't rehab, went to a different sport, still suffered with injury, and the cycle continued. So for me, it was, I need to set better expectations. And that's what it was expectation management. If we have a performance expectation gap, that's where we're going to deal with frustration, heavy frustration, and demotivation to some degree too. So if we've got an athlete that's expecting 100% or even 50% after an injury when they go back to training, then we're going to get this all or nothing thinking. It's going to be, well, fuck it, I don't want to do it. I'm not going to do it because I can't perform to my ability that I need to. So that's when you get people not adhering to exercise plans. It's because going for a walk is nowhere near when they used to run a sub 3 hour marathon. Going for a walk isn't even on their radar of exercise. That doesn't make sense. But they need to realign what that is for them. So with my condition, there's been countless times that I've hit the proverbial rock bottom, where I get very ill, and because of my autoimmune disease, I end up getting incredibly ill, and I hit rock bottom. I can't train for ages, and I have to build myself back up. And every single time, the first thing that I have to do is go walking. And I'm someone that can pride myself on being quite fit, and I can work out quite well. So for someone who's got perfectionist tendencies, that's been a constant battle for myself, constantly being able to, when I get to the bottom, I need to build up. But knowing that when I'm at the bottom, that's not my forever person. That's not who I am. But it is my identity right there. That is who I am, and I need to factor that in.
I like this transience. This transience of identity that's really, really good, because that's ultimately what we're coaching and facilitating in the moment. We're trying to encourage someone to just be different for now in order to achieve who you want to be. And this is definitely something that I hadn't added the language to it, but it's definitely something that I encourage and I facilitate. One of the ways that I think it can be done is hold people accountable to the things that are going to help them to achieve those goals. So whether this is some kind of objective testing or some kind of metric that's meaningful to their journey, meaningful to their end goal, it just means that they know that they're being tested, right? And that's quite powerful. Just the fact that they know, or even the other way around, where the number that you test is lower than they think it is. It's like, hey, look at your other side versus this side. It's just a real powerful way of helping them to change that identity. Actually, I do really need to work on my calf raises, because I'm definitely not as strong as I thought I was. It's like, or whatever it might be. Yeah. Back in the day, I used to, deadlift 100. Yeah, that was 30 years ago. That was whatever it might be. That was a long time ago. That identity is now different. If that's who you think you are now, then let's go and have a look, right? So you just help to shine a mirror so they can see what that identity really is, so they can recalibrate, motivate themselves towards the thing that's important in that moment. Change that identity to, actually, that identity is not helpful right now. You need to change it to something that is helpful, and that's someone who's going to work hard towards the goals that's important to you. You were talking earlier about essentially values, right? And the cognitive dissonance, that how if you've got this values conflict, then it doesn't feel good. And you need to sometimes help people see that and help them see, well, if this is important to you, then you might have to get into the gym. And I know the gym is not a happy place for you, but it's really tough to do this rehab at home because you're not going to have external load. You're not going to have anything that's set up in order to do this exercise in your home environment. So if you do want to get back playing football again, maybe you do have to change that identity a little. Maybe we have to challenge some of those fears that you have to get you into the gym. And that's where some of this mental fitness is coming in. This mindset coaching is really important. And I think I've sort of gradually learned it on the job, but what we're trying to do in this podcast is fast track some of that learning, give people some tools, give people some metaphors and some analogies to use. And from what I understand about your app, and I'd love to use this app, by the way, I'd love to get a real feel for it, that's the playground, that's the gym for the mind. And I really like this whole conversation and where it's leading, the skills people can learn from it. Well, what else about your journey shaped who you are now? Because I think there's some interesting stuff in there that we haven't touched on yet.
Yeah. First of all, I appreciate that sort of summary there, because I think you summarized what I said there perfectly and applied it great. So, I mean, for me as an individual, like, I've always been a high performer, whether that be in academia or like in sport. I did every single sport under the sun. I was a late developer, so I quickly learned that I didn't have the physical traits. I just had to work hard. I think that was nature. I failed numerous times, which was a gift at the time, but reflection on it. But I had a real difficult time coming to terms with my condition, because it is an invisible disability. So when I see people, they wouldn't say anything about it. And the reality is, because it varies so much day to day, and it's got worse as I've got older, it is hard to have consistency. And I need cognitive flexibility. I need to have a flexible mind. But I had such a rigid mind growing up. And now, I guess, to psychoanalyze myself, there's various things that could influence that. But the reality is like, I learned the equation, which I think a lot of youth athletes learn. Work hard, I'll get my results. If I push myself to this limit, then I will succeed. Problem with that is that equation starts to have a few cracks in it at some points. We start to be hypercritical on ourselves when we don't meet those expectations, which then can actually lead to the inverse happening. We actually start to become destructive to ourselves, and we lose our motivation. So for me, it's a journey of, at 17, I ended up in hospital, not because something that was presenting physically, but the reality of it was a mental challenge that I was having. I had an enlarged spleen. I was getting these terrible cramps in my stomach, and I had no idea what it was. And I got, for context, obviously my EDS and POTS, I got IBS, so I was no stranger to stomach problems, but like these cramps were crazy. And I remember getting submitted to hospital, and I was on morphine, and I was in hospital 3 days, and they did all the tests, and all they could see was an enlarged spleen, which didn't really make sense. The reality was, when I look at it, I was so stressed out my mind. I was putting so much pressure on myself. I had no idea where I wanted to go in life. I was struggling with my swimming because my disability was causing me problems where I could only swim for 30 minutes, which, as an athlete, if any swimmers know, you swim for 2 hours, well, morning and night, basically, every single day almost. It's not far off for that sort of volume. So when I was getting out of the pool half an hour early and standing in the showers, you'd get like your mates coming up and like, oh, it's all right for you. And the reality is, I want to be you. I remember one of the athletes I swam with was a Paralympian, honestly, such a great person. And I remember her making one of those comments too, because everyone was making that comment about, oh, I wish I could get out. It was just a passing comment as they went to the toilet, so I was in the shower. And I was like, I really wish I was in the pool. Like, and in that scenario, it was an invisible disability that was stopping me there, not a physical disability. It was stopping me from actually getting there. And so I had a lot of conflict in that moment and cognitive dissonance. I was also pushing myself I'd failed my first year of college, so I was working ridiculously hard to make up for lost time. I did a BTEC in the end, which obviously has missed, people have I guess their preconceptions about BTECs, but it's coursework, and I remember doing A-levels. It was the same content, but it was just done in a coursework fashion. But I finished every single piece of coursework like 3 months before anyone else. So I had a 3-month extra holiday, and I got 100%, not just the highest grade. I got everything. I got to the highest grade because I just held myself to like, I can control coursework. Exams I can't control. I don't do well in that environment. So I was under, rather than stress in a single point, I was under constant stress, like constant like deadlines I set myself every night. Coursework was set, I'd do it that day. That was just how I was. So when you're starting to maybe get a bit of a vision of why I was at a boiling point. I was just bubbling over, and I had an identity crisis as an athlete too. So what the physio that I saw was saying, you're in a state of like fight or flight, like constantly, like you're so tense, your stomach is so tense. And at that point, I learned diaphragmatic breathing. That's when I first learned how to do that. And it was incredibly hard to learn, but it really helped, massively helped. And it's actually something I still do today when my stomach does get to that point. It really helps in that moment. But going back to the hospitals there, like the reason why I got there was because I was just hyper stressed. I truly believe it was because I was just so stressed and so like pent up that I'd caused like the inflammation myself in my spleen, which meant that I was on morphine for 3 days. And then it was the first year that I'd actually qualified to go to nationals for swimming, and I went a day out. I got off to a hospital because I just wanted to go, and I still beat myself up after I didn't perform as well as I should have. I was a couple of seconds off my PB and I still beat myself up.
Yeah, you couldn't attach the context.
No, not at all. So for me, it was learning, I guess, at a young age. I'd been way too much pressure on myself. I had these perfectionist tendencies. I had OCD. I was so just a boil of stress that actually when I removed those expectations or just reduced them a little bit, and I managed the conversation in my head, I can hear who that person is. For me, like this, I haven't really shared this too much, but for me, it's because it sounds a bit silly, but I guess everyone's going to be giving context to their self-talk now, so why shouldn't I? My OCD, the way that it manifested, was in the character Gollum. Now that sounds ridiculously silly in terms of like a character, but I watched Lord of the Rings when I was younger, frightened the living daylights out of me, especially Gollum. And for me, he controlled my life. Like, and obviously this is Gollum we're talking about, not a real character. This is my brain self-talk here. The expectations I put on myself, the things that I demanded, the scenarios I'd play on my head that would happen if I didn't do X, Y, or Z. Like I had compulsions to be able to like stop the obsessive thinking. Like for me, it was touching things in my left hand. I had to do that. Like, and even now when I get quite anxious, I would do it, but I reduced it to a wink in my eye. So I'll just wink my left eye. That's how I get rid of the compulsions. But it was all driven by that negative self-talk from the character Gollum.
Yeah.
And it was at this point that I was starting to realize, when I was getting to the choice of choosing my university degree, I was like, I've conquered a lot physically in terms of like I've been a very good athlete, far greater than many ever will, like as a youth athlete. But it's mentally the thing that actually that I've learned most in this journey. Like, and I've also realized how it's not helpful for me. Like it got me to the proverbial top as an athlete, but I didn't continue to go to the Olympics. I didn't continue to get even into Loughborough swim club because like I just wasn't mentally equipped to do it. I was putting too much stress. I was forcing it too much. So again, in a roundabout way, I guess that's my origins of why I got interested in psychology, because I was just the case study of that myself.
And hopefully and if the people have got to this part of the episode, they're clearly interested in what we're talking about here. So that's then led to you co-developing this app, Getahead, and this mindset mental fitness app. So tell us a bit about how they can get that app and have a look at it, and a bit more about you. How would someone find out a bit more about you?
I appreciate that. Thank you, Charlie. So Getahead Mindset, that is the company. It's a on-demand sports psychology app. Our ambition is to be the leading mental fitness app in the world, like a platform in the world. It's sports psychology in your pocket. Rather than it being reserved for the elitists, like Olympic programs or football clubs, or mental health being available for people that are ready to go for a clinical disorder, which is most definitely needed. This is that middle space for people that just want to optimize their mind, or do have a bit of a weird experience, maybe like with pressure scenarios, for example, that does throw up, I guess, the emotional cocktail that we're not used to handling. We do have that self-talk that's demanding too much or demanding too little, and you're not being able to motivate yourself. Like, you don't have to be in a place of I guess, a clinical disorder or a presenting problem that's ruining your life to be able to start actively working on your mindset. And Getahead, what we're doing is trying to make that actually something into a daily routine, something that you can do daily without having to labeling yourself. You don't have to label yourself as having a problem. You're just trying to improve. And our slogan is forget limits, redefine possible. And that's what we're trying to do for every athlete, every exerciser out there. And if you want to reach me, Getahead Mindset on Instagram is the best place. You can check us out at getaheadmindset.com. Download us on the App Store, Google Play and whatnot. Plenty of cool features coming in. We've got an AI coach coming in, so you can have therapy sort of in your pocket, sports psychology, mental training in your pocket, and a mental profile called the Mental Edge. So you can actually, if you don't know what is actually something you want to work on, don't worry, we can help you figure that out anyway by finding out what are the things that presenting limiting patterns, but the things that you're great at, things that maybe you need to work on to get to that next level. Yeah,
I'm going to give this a look, actually. I really like the idea of it. Is there anything else we've not covered that you wanted to add?
I mean, I think you've done such a great job. Like, honestly, okay. Thanks so much, Charlie. Like, I think, I think you've hit everything from my side. Anyway.
Yeah. Well, the final part from us is, what does better never ends mean to you? In fear of potentially provoking any kind of negative mental connotations here. But, yeah.
No. I love that. I think, better never ends is interesting. I think it's something that, again, the perfectionist in me has to sort of deal with, which it would be, that is a constant thing. But the reality is, as we said earlier about identity, better never ends. Better is a word. It's subjective. And better doesn't necessarily need to mean faster. That it doesn't have to mean that at all. Better can just mean an increased awareness, or the fact that you've managed to be more consistent, the fact that you've been able to continue to uphold the values in which you use as adjectives to your identity. That is better. You're still like pursuing that, because the moment you stop, that's when the problem's going to occur, right?
Yeah, very good. Thanks so much for coming in.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to today's podcast. This podcast is sponsored by Better, provider of health and wellness services in central London. We really believe that we can help people feel better and live better. You can book in for face-to-face services at any of our 3 London clinics. We have one in Marylebone, one in Soho, and one in the city. You can also follow us on Instagram at Better Never Ends, or head over to our website for more information about the clinics or the podcast at www.betterneverends.com.